Gina pressed her body flat against the cold metal wall of the ventilation shaft. Her breath came in short, quiet gasps. She could hear them below, moving through the corridors of the dead ship. The clicking sound of claws on metal floors echoed through the darkness. 3 weeks. She had survived 3 weeks alone on this abandoned colony ship. 3 weeks since the Vrakish raiders attacked her research vessel. 3 weeks since she watched her team die. The Vrakish were hunters. Everyone in the galaxy knew this. They were tall, covered in dark fur, with eyes that could see in almost total darkness. Their sense of smell was better than any tracking device humans had ever made. They lived for the hunt, lived for the chase. And right now, they were hunting her. Gina knew the Alpha was still looking for her. She had seen him from a distance several times. He was larger than the others, with silver streaks in his black fur. His eyes glowed amber in the dim light of the ship. The other Vrakish seemed to follow his every command without question. She should have been dead by now. Any normal human would be. But Gina had spent her entire adult life studying alien species and their behavior. She knew how to hide her scent, how to move without making sound, how to think like prey that wanted to survive. The clicking sounds faded. Gina waited 5 more minutes before moving. She crawled through the ventilation shaft toward the lower levels of the ship. Her water supply was almost gone. She needed to find the emergency storage areas. The ship had been called Seolwa's Dream once. It was supposed to be a new colony, a fresh start for thousands of families. But something went wrong during the journey. The ship never made it to its destination. Now it just drifted in space, empty and cold. Gina dropped down from the vent into a dark hallway. Her small flashlight cut through the shadows. She moved quickly, keeping close to the walls. The storage bay should be 2 levels down. She found the stairs and started descending. Each step felt too loud in the silence. Halfway down, she froze. There was a sound ahead. Not the clicking of rakish claws. Something else. Something smaller. Whimpering. Jina single quotes as heart pounded. It could be a trap. The Vrakish were smart enough to use bait. But the sound came again, weak and scared. It sounded like crying against every survival instinct she had. Gina moved toward the sound. The cargo bay doors were partially open. She squeezed through the gap and entered the massive room. Containers were stacked everywhere, most of them broken open and empty. Her flashlight beam swept across the space. There, behind a fallen container in the corner. 2 small shapes huddled together. Gina approached slowly. Her light revealed 2 young Vrakish, much smaller than the adults. They couldn't have been more than children. Their fur was matted and dirty. They shrank back from her light, making frightened sounds. One of them, the smaller one, had blood on her leg. The wound looked infected. Gina stopped. These were Vrakish cubs. The children of the species that killed her friends. The species currently hunting her through this ship. She should leave them. She should run, but they were just children. Scared, hurt, abandoned children. The larger cub moved in front of his sister, trying to protect her despite being terrified himself. His small body shook, but he didn't run away. Gina slowly sat down on the floor. She was still several feet away from them. She turned off her flashlight except for the dimmest setting. Then she reached into her pack and pulled out one of her last protein bars. She broke it in half and slid the pieces across the floor toward them. The cubs stared at the food, then at her, then back at the food. The larger one sniffed the air. Slowly, carefully, he grabbed one piece and gave it to his sister. She ate it quickly, desperately. He took the other piece for himself. Gina pulled out her water bottle and poured some into a small container. She slid that toward them too. They drank like they hadn't had water in days. When they finished, the female cub made a small sound. Her brother looked at Gina with less fear in his eyes. "It's okay," Gina whispered, though she knew they couldn't understand her words. "I won't hurt you." She moved a little closer. The cubs tensed but didn't run. Gina could see the injured leg better now. It was definitely infected. Without treatment, the small female might not survive. Gina had medical supplies in her pack. She had been saving them for herself. But looking at these 2 small beings, abandoned and alone in the dark, She couldn't just leave them to die. She spent the next hour slowly earning their trust. By the end, she was able to examine the injury. The female cub whimpered when Gina cleaned the wound, but her brother nuzzled against her, keeping her calm. Gina wrapped the leg carefully with clean bandages. She gave them more food and water. She found some old blankets in the cargo containers and made a soft place for them to rest. The cubs curled up together in the blankets. The female looked at Gina with tired eyes. Then slowly she reached out one small paw and touched Gina's hand. Something broke inside Gina's chest. These weren't monsters. They were children who needed help. She settled down near them, keeping watch. She knew this changed everything. The alpha was hunting her, and now she had his cubs. She should use them as bargaining tools. She should use them to save herself, but she wouldn't. She see OULDN single quotes above them, somewhere in the ship. The clicking of claws echoed again. The hunt continued. Jaina held still, listening. The female cub, despite everything, despite her injury and fear, slowly fell asleep with her head resting against Gina's leg. The larger cub watched Gina for a long moment. Then he too closed his eyes, trusting this strange creature to keep them safe. Gina sat in the darkness with two alien children sleeping beside her, and wondered what she had just gotten herself into. 5 days passed. Gina moved the cubs 3 times to different hiding spots across the ship. Each location was carefully chosen, places where the adult Vrakish wouldn't think to look. She used her knowledge of their hunting patterns to stay ahead of them. The female cub's leg was healing. Gina changed her bandages twice a day. The infection was clearing up thanks to the antibiotics from Gina's medical kit. The cub no longer whimpered when she walked. Gina had started calling them by names, though she knew they were probably wrong. The female she called Hana, because she seemed delicate like a flower despite her strength. The male she called Minho, because he was brave and protective like a warrior. Minho always stayed close to his sister. When Gina approached, he would position himself between them until Hana made a happy sound. Only then would he relax. He was learning to trust Gina, but his first duty was always to protect Hana. The cubs were learning about Gina too. They watched everything she did with curious eyes. When she ate, they watched. When she worked on her equipment, they watched. When she whispered to herself to stay calm, they made soft sounds back at her. Gina's food supplies were running critically low. She was giving most of her rations to the cubs. They were growing and they needed the food more than she did. She told herself she could survive on less. She had to. On the 6th day, Hana brought Gina something. It was a small piece of shiny metal she had found somewhere. The cub held it out to Gina like a gift, her eyes bright. Gina took it carefully, feeling tears sting her eyes. "Thank you, Hana." Hana made a pleased sound and curled up against Gina's side. Minho watched for a moment, then decided it was safe. He curled up on Gina's other side. They fell asleep like that, the 3 of them huddled together in the cold ship. Gina stayed awake, keeping watch. She thought about her team, about her life before all this. She had become a xenobiologist because she believed different species could understand each other. Most people thought she was naive. Maybe they were right, but here she was, protecting 2 alien children while their father hunted her. If that wasn't understanding between species, she didn't know what was. The next day, Gina made a mistake. She was scavenging for supplies in the upper deck when she heard voices. Not clicking or growling. Actual voices speaking in the Vrakish language. She froze behind a storage cabinet. 2 Vrakish warriors were close by, talking to each other. "The alpha grows restless," one said. "This hunt has taken too long." "She is clever, this human," the other replied. "More clever than the others were. We should abandon this pursuit. The honor has been satisfied. The other humans are dead. You know Timan will not stop? His pride demands he finish what he started." Timan. So that was the alpha's name. "His cubs are still missing," the first voice said. "Perhaps we should focus on finding them instead. Timan believes they died in the attack. He performs his grief through this hunt." The voices faded as the warriors moved away. Gina stayed hidden for a long time after they left. Her mind was racing. Today, Amine thought his cubs were dead. He didn't know they were alive. He was hunting her to deal with his grief, to maintain his honor as alpha, and she had his children safe with her. Gina made her way back to the cubs. They greeted her with happy sounds. Minho brought her a container of water he had found. Hannah showed her that she could now run on her injured leg without limping. They trusted her completely now. They played with the few toys she had made for them from scrap materials. They ate from her hands. They slept peacefully when she sang soft songs to them, even though they couldn't understand the words. Gina realized something that scared her. She loved them. Despite everything, despite the danger, despite knowing their father was hunting her, she loved these two small beings like they were her own. At night, she told them stories. She didn't know if they understood, but they listened. She told them about Earth, about oceans and forests. She told them about her family. She told them about her dreams of a galaxy, where different species could live together in peace. Hannah would put her small paw on Gina's hand while she talked. Minho would rest his head on her knee. On the 10th day, Gina found a working communication panel. She could send a distress signal to human space. Rescue might come. She could leave this ship, leave the danger, but she looked at Hannah and Minho playing together, chasing each other around the small room. She thought about what would happen to them if she left. Would the adult Vrakish find them? Would they survive on their own? She couldn't do it. She couldn't abandon them. Gina destroyed the communication panel. She made her choice. She would stay. She would protect them. Even if it meant never getting rescued. Even if it meant Timon eventually found her. That night, as the cubs slept curled against her, Gina made a promise. I'll keep you safe, no matter what happens. I promise. Minho stirred in his sleep, making a small content sound. Hannah's breathing was deep and peaceful. Somewhere in the ship, Timon was still hunting. But he wasn't just hunting a human anymore. He was hunting the person who had become his children's protector. Gina didn't know how this would end. She only knew that she would do whatever it took to keep Hannah and Minho safe. They were innocent in all of this. They deserved a chance to grow up, to live, even if giving them that chance cost Gina everything. The days continued. The supplies grew fewer. The danger grew closer. But in their small hidden space, a human and two Vrakish cubs became something impossible. They became a family, and Gina realized that this, right here, was what she had always believed in. That love and protection could cross any boundary. That children were children, no matter what species they belonged to. That sometimes the most important thing wasn't survival. Sometimes it was simply being there. For someone who needed you, the hunt was far from over. But something had changed. Gina wasn't just running anymore. She was fighting. Fighting to protect something precious. Fighting for a future where maybe, just maybe, humans and Vrakish could see each other as something more than enemies. It started with two small cubs and one human, who refused to leave them behind. The Botanical Research Dome was Gina's last hiding place. She had run out of options. The adult Vrakish had searched every other section of the ship. This was the only area left. The dome was beautiful in a wild, abandoned way. Plants from a dozen different worlds had grown together without human care for years. Trees reached up toward the curved glass ceiling. Vines covered the walls. Strange flowers bloomed in impossible colors. Gina sat on the ground with her back against a tree. Hannah and Minho slept in her arms, tired from the long journey through the ship's corridors. They trusted her so completely now. They felt safe with her. She knew Timon would come soon. She could feel it. The hunt was ending. Gina wasn't afraid for herself anymore. She was afraid for the cubs. What would happen to them? Would Timon understand that she had protected them? Or would he only see an enemy holding his children? The door to the dome opened. Timon entered alone. He was massive, much larger than Gina had realized from seeing him at a distance. His fur was dark with silver streaks that caught the dim light. His amber eyes locked onto her immediately. He moved forward slowly, his claws extended. Each step was deliberate, controlled. This was a hunter who had finally cornered his prey. Gina didn't move. She couldn't run anymore. She was exhausted, starving, and weak. But more than that, she wouldn't run. Running would wake the cubs, would scare them. She wouldn't do that to them in their last peaceful moments. Timon stopped 10 feet away. He stood tall, every muscle in his body tense. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and growling. The words were in the Vrakish language, but Gina understood their meaning from his tone. This was it. The end of the hunt? Timon's lips pulled back, showing his fangs. He snarled, the sound echoing through the dome. She's mine to kill. His pack would be outside, waiting. This was about honor. An alpha finished his own hunt. Timon took another step forward, his eyes fixed on Gina with deadly intent. Then he saw them. His entire body went rigid. His snarl died in his throat. His eyes widened. Hana and Minho were curled in Gina's arms, sleeping peacefully. Hana's injured leg, now healed, was stretched out comfortably. Minho was tucked against Gina's chest, his small body rising and falling with deep, content breaths. They looked healthy. They looked safe. They looked loved. Ian stood frozen. His claws were still extended, but his arms hung at his sides. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. The silence stretched. Gina could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the soft breathing of the cubs, could hear the rustle of leaves in the dome's artificial wind. She looked directly into Timon's eyes. She didn't try to speak. What could she say that he would understand? Instead, she slowly, carefully adjusted her position. She moved so that the cubs were slightly behind her. If he struck, he would have to go through her first. Timon's eyes followed the movement. He saw what she was doing. She was protecting them, protecting his children. From him, his claws slowly retracted. His arms dropped to his sides. Gina took a breath and spoke. Her voice was quiet, not wanting to wake the cubs. They were starving. Hana was hurt. She gestured to the female cub's leg. I couldn't leave them. She didn't know if he understood her words, but maybe he would understand her tone. The gentleness, the care. Minho stirred in his sleep, making a small sound. It was the same content sound he made every time he felt safe and comfortable. The sound of a child who knew he was protected. Timon's ears twitched at the sound. His eyes fixed on his son. Hana shifted, pressing closer to Gina in her sleep. Her small paw rested on Gina's arm, holding on even while unconscious. Timon saw all of it. His children, alive and healthy, sleeping peacefully in the arms of the prey he had been hunting for weeks. He took a step back. The movement was small, but it meant everything. He wasn't advancing. He wasn't attacking. Gina kept her eyes on him. Slowly, she reached out and gently stroked Hana's head, a gesture of comfort and protection. The cub made a happy sound in her sleep. Something changed in Timon's expression. The deadly hunter's focus faded. In its place was something else, confusion, conflict, and underneath it all, something that looked almost like pain. He spoke again, his voice different now, quieter. The words were still in his language, but Gina heard the question in them. Why? Why had she saved them? Why had she protected the children of her enemy? Why had she sacrificed her own safety, her own food, her own chance of rescue for them? Gina answered even though she knew he might not understand. Because they're children. Because they needed help. Because it was the right thing to do. She paused, then added more softly, because I couldn't leave them alone in the dark. The door to the dome opened again. Another Vrakish entered, smaller than Timon, but still dangerous. He started to speak, but Timon raised one hand, stopping him immediately. The other Vrakish saw the cubs. His eyes went wide with shock. More Vrakish entered. 4, 5, 6 of them. They all stopped when they saw the scene. Their alpha standing motionless, facing a human who held his thought-dead cubs in her arms. No one moved. No one spoke. Minho woke up. He yawned and opened his eyes, looking up at Gina. Then he noticed all the adult Vrakish. His small body went tense, but before he could get scared, he saw Timon. His eyes lit up. He made a sound Gina had never heard before, something between a chirp and a cry. It was the sound of a child seeing his father. Minho scrambled out of Gina's arms and ran toward Timon on unsteady legs. Timon dropped to his knees. Minho crashed into him, making happy sounds, nuzzling against his father's chest. Teeman wrapped his arms around his son. His eyes closed. His whole body shook. Hana woke up from the noise. She saw Minho with Teeman and made the same happy sound. But when she started to run to her father, she stopped and looked back at Gina. The little cub was confused. She wanted to go to her father, but she didn't want to leave Gina. Gina smiled, despite her fear, despite everything. "It's okay, Hana. Go to him." Hana ran to Teeman. He gathered both cubs in his arms, holding them close, making deep sounds that Gina somehow knew were words of love and relief. The other Vrakish watched in silence. Teeman looked up at Gina. Their eyes met across the dome. The cubs were between them now, safe in their father's arms, but looking back at Gina with trust and affection. The hunt was over. But how it would end, Gina didn't know. She had saved his children, but she was still his prey. Still the enemy. She waited, holding her breath, for Teeman to decide her fate. The fight was brutal. Teeman and the second-in-command clashed again and again. Their claws left marks on each other. Blood stained the ground beneath them. The pack watched in tense silence. This was their way. Leadership was proven through strength. Whoever won this fight would lead them. Gina couldn't watch Teeman get hurt because of her. She couldn't stand here doing nothing while he fought for her life. The second-in-command landed a heavy blow to Teeman's side. The Alpha stumbled. The challenger moved in for a finishing strike. Gina stepped into the circle. The pack gasped. The young female who had translated started to shout a warning. But it was too late. Gina placed herself between the two fighting Vrakish. She held up her hands, her small human body a fragile barrier between two powerful warriors. "Stop," she shouted. "Please, just stop." The second-in-command froze, his claws inches from her face. Teeman grabbed Gina's arm, trying to pull her back, but she stood firm. "This is wrong," Gina said, her voice shaking but determined. "You're fighting over honor, over tradition. But you're missing what really matters." She pointed at Hana and Minho, who stood at the edge of the circle, terrified. "They matter, your cubs, your children, your future. That's what matters." The second-in-command lowered his claws slightly. He was listening, even if he didn't understand her words. Gina turned to address the whole pack. "I know you don't understand me. I know I'm your enemy. But think about this. Your Alpha found out his children were alive. They were saved by someone he was hunting. Someone who could have used them as hostages, could have hurt them, could have left them to die." She gestured to the cubs. "But I didn't, because they're children. Because no matter what species we are, some things are universal. We all protect our young. We all love our families. We all want a better future." The pack was silent, watching her. "Your strength is in your unity," Gina continued, "in your loyalty to each other. But true strength isn't just about fighting. It's about knowing when not to fight. It's about protecting what matters. It's about choosing a different path when the old path leads nowhere good." She looked at Teeman. "Your Alpha made a hard choice. He chose his children's savior over his pride. That's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of strength." Then she looked at the second-in-command. "And you're strong too. You're protecting your pack's traditions, their honor. But traditions can change, honor can grow. Maybe it's time for a new kind of strength." The young female translated Gina's words in a hushed voice. The pack members looked at each other, uncertain. Gina took a deep breath. "I'm just one human. You could kill me easily. But if you do, what will you tell Hana and Minho? That you killed the person who saved their lives? That your honor was more important than their happiness?" Minho suddenly broke away from the crowd. He ran to Gina and hugged her leg, crying. Hana followed, wrapping her small arms around Gina's other leg. The cubs clung to Gina, refusing to let go. They made desperate sounds, begging in their own language. The second-in-command stared at this scene. His expression slowly changed. The anger faded, replaced by something else. Understanding, maybe. Or at least doubt. He lowered his claws completely. He spoke to Teeman in a quiet voice. Teeman responded, equally quiet. The two warriors looked at each other for a long moment. Then the second-in-command did something unexpected. He placed his fist over his heart and bowed his head slightly to Teeman. The challenge was over. Teeman had won. Not through fighting, but through something else. The Alpha turned to his pack. He spoke in a strong, clear voice. He pointed to Gina, to his cubs, and to his own chest. His words rang through the dome. The young translator spoke softly to Gina. Alpha says, "You teach us something today. That strength comes in many forms. That honor without compassion is empty. That maybe humans and Vrakish are not so different." More Vrakish stepped forward one by one. They placed their fists over their hearts, acknowledging something, accepting something, not all of them. Some still looked uncertain, even hostile. But enough. Enough to change things. Timon approached Gina. He gently moved his cubs aside, then stood before her. He spoke directly to her, his voice formal but warm. The translator explained. Alpha says you are under pack protection now. You are den mother to his cubs. You have place with us if you want it. Gina felt tears streaming down her face. She had expected to die. She had made peace with it. But this was something she never imagined. She struggled to speak. I just did what anyone should do. Timon shook his head. Through the translator he said, no, most would not. Most would think only of themselves. You thought of children who were not your own, of a species that hunted you. That is rare. That is precious. He paused, then added, we have much to learn from humans. You have much to teach us. The next hours were strange and wonderful. The Vrakish pack tended to Timon's wounds. They brought food and water. They examined Hana's healed leg with approval, acknowledging Gina's care. The second in command approached Gina. Through the translator he said, I was wrong. Honor is important. But life is more important. Cubs are more important. You showed me this. He placed his fist over his heart. I am Kyung. I serve the Alpha. Now I also protect the Den Mother. Slowly, carefully, a bridge began to form. Gina taught the Vrakish some human words. They taught her some of their language. It was clumsy and difficult, but it was a start. Hana and Minho stayed close to Gina, though they also spent time with their father and pack. They were the connection between two species, living proof that understanding was possible. Days later, the Vrakish prepared to leave the dead ship. Timon offered to take Gina to the nearest human outpost. The journey would be long, but he promised she would arrive safely. But before they left, something happened. The young translator came to Gina with a message from the pack elders. They want you to return, she said, when you are ready, to visit the cubs, to teach us more about humans, to help us understand each other. Gina looked at Hana and Minho playing nearby. She looked at Timon, who watched his children with obvious love. She looked at the pack, who now treated her with respect instead of hostility. I will, she promised. I'll come back. Because this was bigger than her. Bigger than one person or one pack. This was the beginning of something new. A chance for two species to see each other not as enemies, but as people who could learn from each other. The ship's journey to the human outpost took 2 weeks. Gina spent that time learning Vrakish customs, teaching human ideas, and caring for the cubs. When they finally arrived, she felt torn between two worlds. Hana and Minho cried when Gina prepared to leave. She held them close, promising to return. Timon stood nearby, his expression unreadable. You changed everything, he said through the translator. One human, one act of kindness, everything changed. Gina smiled. Maybe it was time for things to change. As she prepared to board the human station, Minho ran back and pressed something into her hand. It was the shiny piece of metal Hana had given her weeks ago. The cubs wanted her to keep it. To remember them, Gina held the metal tight. I could never forget you. Either of you. She looked at Timon. Take care of them, always, he promised. And you take care of yourself, Den Mother? We will meet again. Gina entered the human station. The officials were shocked to see her alive. They had questions, so many questions. How had she survived? Where had she been? She told them everything. About the cubs, about Timon, about the choice she made. Some officials were skeptical, others were amazed. But all of them understood that something important had happened. Within months, official talks began between human governments and Vrakish packs. It was difficult. There was suspicion on both sides. But there was also curiosity, interest, hope. Gina became an ambassador. She traveled between human and Vrakish territories, building bridges, explaining cultures, helping both sides understand each other. She visited Hannah and Minho often, watched them grow, taught them about both their worlds. They became symbols of a new possibility. Years passed. Relations between humans and Vrakish improved slowly but steadily. There were setbacks. There were conflicts. But there was also progress, and it all started with one human who couldn't leave two children alone in the dark. One person who chose compassion over survival. One moment when an alpha chose not to kill. Jaina kept the piece of metal Hannah had given her. She carried it always, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change entire worlds. The galaxy was vast. Species were many. Understanding was hard, but it was possible, if people were willing to try. If they were willing to see beyond old hatreds and ancient wars. If they were willing to protect the innocent, whoever they were. That was humanity's gift. Not superior weapons or advanced technology, simply the ability to care for those who needed it. To love beyond boundaries. To choose mercy when it would be easier to choose violence. That was what it meant to be human. And perhaps in teaching the Vrakish this truth, humans had learned something too. That strength came in many forms. That honor could be redefined. That the future didn't have to look like the past. Somewhere in space, on a Vrakish world, two cubs grew into strong adults. They remembered the human who saved them. And they taught their own children about the strange, wonderful creatures called humans who could look at an enemy and choose to see a friend. Timon stood slowly, still holding his cubs. Minho and Hannah clung to him, but they kept looking back at Gina. Their eyes were bright and trusting. Not understanding the tension in the air, one of the other Vrakish stepped forward. He was lean and scarred, with gray fur mixed into his black coat. His voice was hard when he spoke in their language. Timon answered. Without looking away from Gina, the other Vrakish's eyes widened. He spoke again, his tone sharp and challenging. Gina didn't need to understand the words to know what was happening. There was an argument about her, about what should happen next. More Vrakish entered the dome. The whole pack was here now, at least 20 of them. They formed a circle around Gina and Timon, watching, waiting. The gray-furred Vrakish, the one who had challenged Timon, spoke louder now. He pointed at Gina. Other pack members growled in agreement. And set the cubs down gently. He spoke to them in a soft voice, clearly telling them to stay back. Then he turned to face his pack. He spoke in a commanding tone. The alpha giving orders. But several pack members growled back. This was wrong, Gina realized. They weren't following him. The gray-furred one, who Gina guessed was second in command, stepped into the center of the circle. He spoke directly to Timon, his words sharp like accusations. Timon responded, his voice steady but strained. Hannah made a worried sound. She started to walk toward Gina, but Minho gently pulled her back. Even the young cub understood something bad was happening. Gina's translator device had been damaged weeks ago, but she wished desperately that it still worked. She needed to understand what they were saying. The second in command pointed at Gina again, then made a slashing gesture with his claws. The meaning was clear. She should die. The hunt must be completed. Timon moved between Gina and the other Vrakish. He spoke firmly, shaking his head. The dome erupted with voices. Pack members taking sides. Some agreed with Timon. Others agreed with the second in command. The argument grew heated. Gina saw Hannah trembling. The little cub was scared by all the angry voices. Without thinking, Gina made a soft clicking sound. The same sound she used to comfort the cubs when they were frightened. Hannah's ears perked up. She looked at Gina with those trusting eyes. The second in command saw this. He saw the bond between the human and the cubs. His expression darkened. He spoke to Timon, his words dripping with contempt. Timon's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Gina thought he would attack his own pack member. But he controlled himself, responding in a level voice. It wasn't enough. The second in command made a formal gesture, placing his fist over his heart and then pointing at Timon. Gina understood. It was a challenge. For leadership, the pack went silent. Timon's shoulders sagged slightly. He looked at his cubs, then at Gina, then back at his challenger. He spoke quietly. The words sounded like an explanation or maybe a plea for understanding. The second in command laughed. It was not a kind sound. He responded with words that were clearly an ultimatum. Gina's mind raced. She understood the situation now. Timon was trying to protect her, but it was costing him his position as alpha. His own pack was turning against him because he wouldn't complete the hunt. She couldn't let that happen. These people were his family, his life. She was just a stranger. Gina stood up slowly. Every rakish eye turned to her. She held up her hands, showing she was unarmed, not a threat. "Wait," she said, even though she knew most of them couldn't understand her. "Please wait." She took a step forward. Several rakish growled, but Timon held up a hand, stopping them. Gina pointed to herself, then to Timon, then to the cubs. She tried to find a way to make them understand. "You're alpha ... She struggled to find the words. He wanted to complete his hunt. "That's honor, right?" "That's your way." She pointed at Hannah and Minho. "But his cubs were dying, starving, hurt. I found them by accident. I couldn't just leave them." Gina looked directly at the second in command. "Your honor says complete the hunt. But what kind of honor leaves children to die? What kind of strength is it to let cubs starve while you chase revenge?" She didn't know if any of them understood her words, but she hoped they understood her tone, her gestures. "I'm human," Gina continued. "Maybe our honor is different. We believe that protecting children, any children, is the highest honor. We believe that choosing mercy isn't weakness. It's the hardest choice. The strongest choice." Minho suddenly broke away from where he was standing. He ran to Gina and grabbed her hand. He looked up at his father, then at the second in command, then back at Gina. The message was clear. "Don't hurt her." Hannah followed her brother. She wrapped her small arms around Gina's leg, holding on tight. The second in command stared at this scene. His expression was unreadable. Timon spoke again. His voice was different now, stronger. He gestured to his cubs, to Gina, to the pack. He spoke for a long time, and Gina heard passion in his words. When he finished, he did something unexpected. He knelt down on one knee in front of Gina. His pack gasped. He spoke a phrase in his language. Then he pointed to Gina, to his cubs, and placed his fist over his heart. One of the younger Vrakish in the pack stepped forward. She spoke to Gina in broken but understandable human language. "Alpha says, you have honor. Greater honor. You protect cubs when he could not. You give up safety for them. You—" She struggled for the word. "You show true strength," the young Vrakish continued. "Alpha claims you under pack protection. Old law, very old. For those who show exceptional courage." The second in command snarled. He spoke rapidly, angrily. Timon stood and turned to face him. He responded calmly, but there was steel in his voice. The second in command's eyes narrowed. He made the challenge gesture again, more aggressively this time. Timon nodded slowly. He accepted the challenge. The pack moved back, forming a wider circle. This was going to be a fight. A real one. Gina's heart sank. This was her fault. Timon was going to fight, maybe die, because he chose to protect her. "No," she said. "Stop. This isn't worth it. Just let him." But Timon looked back at her and shook his head. His expression was calm. He had made his choice. The two Vrakish circled each other. The second in command struck first, fast and brutal. Timon blocked and countered. They fought with incredible speed and strength, claws and fangs flashing. Hannah buried her face against Gina, not wanting to watch. Minho held Gina's hand tight, trembling but unable to look away from his father's fight. The battle was fierce. Both warriors were skilled, both were strong. Blood was drawn. Neither would give up, and Gina realized that this moment right now would decide everything. Not just her fate, but the future of how these two species might see each other.